Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to do Chapter 5 of Peter Pan. There are no vocabulary words for today, so we'll just get right into the chapter. So Chapter 5 is called The Long Flight. Second to the right and then straight on until morning. Wendy remembered what Peter had said, but it seemed that even birds carrying street maps and consulting them at windy corners couldn't have found Neverland with those directions. And so Michael and Wendy and John had no choice but to follow Peter and to trust him completely. He led them around in circles, flying past church spires and clock towers and any other tall object that struck his fancy. John and Michael didn't mind. They were having too much fun flying over the ocean, racing each other between waves. Wendy, however, was worried. It seemed to her that they had been flying for days now. Was the island called Neverland because they would never land? It certainly seemed a possibility. She was relieved, at least, that Peter was feeding them, although his way of doing so was rather strange. He would chase birds that had food in their mouths and steal it. The birds would then steal it back. And so it went like this for a while until someone managed to gobble the food down. Worst of all, the children were getting incredibly sleepy. Occasionally, one of them would fall asleep while flying and drop like a heavy stone toward the cruel sea below. It always turned out all right. Either the other children would shout, "Wake up!" or Peter would swoop down at the last minute to save the falling child. But they each came awfully close to the water a few times. One of these days, Wendy thought, Peter might let them fall just for the fun of it, because it would be an interesting sight to see. "Don't make him mad," Wendy whispered to John. "What would we do if he left us?" "We would go back," John said. "We don't know the way." "Well, then, we would go on," said John. "We don't know that way either. In fact, we don't even know how to stop flying." John thought about this. Wendy was right. Peter had never shown them how to stop. "Well," he said, "worst comes to worst, we could always just keep going. The world is round, after all. Eventually, we would get back to our bedroom window, don't you think?" Peter was nowhere to be found. It wasn't uncommon for him to leave them occasionally. Easily bored and distracted, he would fly up high to talk to the stars, or down low to talk with a mermaid. He always came back, but sometimes he seemed barely to remember them, as if he had already moved on to his next adventure. "I'm Wendy," Wendy had reminded him once, when he had flown back and looked at her blankly. "I know that," Peter had said, but she could tell he was lying. Eventually, the children learned how to fall asleep without falling. Peter, however, found this boring, so he would cry out and wake them up anyway, just to see them jump. At last they reached Neverland. Less due to Peter's guidance, it seemed to Wendy, than through sheer luck, or perhaps because the island had been looking for them. "There it is," Peter said. He gestured in the direction the sun was shining, like 100 golden arrows pointing to the island. "Look, there's the coral reef and the tiny hut in the cave," cried John, "and my lagoon with the flying flamingos. And there's the hunchbacked little old lady, and the turtles laying their eggs, and the sewing gnomes," Michael added, "and my flamingo with the flying lagoons." "Hello, Wolfie," Wendy called down to her pet wolf. "Hello, Boat." The children also saw and recognized the scary first days at school, trying not to laugh at church, the pop quizzes they hadn't studied for, the tooth fairy money, and the delicious chocolate pudding. It was all so familiar. Peter was a little annoyed with the children for knowing so much about the island. He wanted to be the one who knew everything. Shortly, however, the sun went down and the children got scared. Then Peter felt better because they needed him again. Down below, black shadows grew and strange noises could be heard. Out in the open sky, there was no night lights or nanas to keep a child safe. The children were on their own. Huddling close to Peter, they flew so low now that their toes occasionally brushed the ocean. Something strange hung in the air. All of them could sense it. "They don't want us to land," Peter said. "Who are they?" Wendy whispered, shuddering. Peter wouldn't say. Instead, he said, "This island is full of pirates, and their captain, Hook, is the biggest pirate of all." The boys had been excited about the pirates, but at the reality of them, Michael began to cry, and even John gulped. "Of course, Hook's not quite as big as he used to be," Peter added, "thanks to me. During our last battle, I chopped off his right hand with my sword. Now he has an iron claw instead of his fingers. If you meet him, you leave him to me. Got it?" "Yes." "Don't say yes. Say, 'Aye, aye, sir.' Every boy who serves under me has to say that." "Aye, aye, sir," John replied. It occurred to John then that Tinker Bell's light might make it easier for the pirates to see them. "Tell her to go away at once," the children cried, but he refused. "She gets scared and lonely too," he said. They compromised. John would carry Tink in his hat, which he would hold in his hand. This worked for a while, until John got tired and Wendy took over. "Don't think that this changes anything between us," the still jealous Tink clinked, if only for Peter's benefit. Suddenly, the quiet black sky was split in two by a loud boom. The noise echoed through the dark mountains. "It's their cannon!" John cried. "The pirates have fired it at us! Is anyone shot?" "I'm not," Michael said. But wait, where were Peter and Wendy? The wind from the cannon fire had carried Peter far out to sea, and Wendy and Tink blew high up into the black sky. Tink wasn't all bad, but fairies are so small that they only have room for one feeling at a time. When she was around Wendy, the jealousy Tink felt could barely fit. Seeing a chance to rid herself of Wendy, Tink gestured for the girl to follow her. What else could Wendy do, all alone in the sky? She flew trustingly after the fairy to meet her fate. And that's the end of chapter 5 on this Friday. And your pocket is not a pocket anyway. It's like a little book this time. It says The Long Flight, and this is what mine looks like when it's all colored. All right, so in your packet, it looks like this. So you cut it all out, and then fold the back flap back like this. And when you open it, on the inside is where you write your answers to your questions. Now, once again, the questions are not on this little booklet. They're in your packet. So the questions for today are, and they're right at the top of the page that you just cut this out of. Why did Wendy think the island was named Neverland? And the second question is, what happened when they reached the island? So please either take a picture of your answers and send it to me from your booklet, or you can email them to me. Just type them into the email and send them to me that way. Okay, I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday for chapter number 6.